Good morning, brothers and sisters. This past week, we celebrated the sad anniversary of the Supreme Court decision Roe versus Wade, in which abortion became legal in our country. Thank the Lord that we had the March for Life to show again support for this great gift and our fundamental belief to try to overturn this great evil. But I think it's important that we take a moment and reflect on exactly how evil abortion is. It's important to remind ourselves of this because we've had it so long. It's been so much a part of our lives and country that we may recognize it as bad, but we might not always feel how bad or how evil it truly is. So I want you to consider from this standpoint, all murder is evil, of course. So it doesn't matter who you're murdering. If you're taking the life of an innocent person, you're breaking the commandments of God, it's evil. And so on a certain level, whoever breaks that commandment in whatever way is committing murder. But there are degrees of murder within that classification. If you murdered somebody who was in the prime of their life where they were trying to defend themselves, it's still murder, but they at least had a fighting chance. So you can imagine that type of murder would be less severe than the type of murder where you kill somebody who can't defend themselves. It's a hierarchy, if you will, of murder. So the more defenseless a person is when you take their life, the more sinistre, evil, demonic, the murder would be. So how does a culture who claims to love life, respect the rights of individuals, get to a point in which they kill the most vulnerable of their society? So I want you to think of the most innocent person you know. It's probably one of the youngest people you know. It may be a baby. And imagine them being slaughtered legally by their parents. For whatever reason, they're an inconvenience, they cost too much, whatever. Imagine this person being killed in that way, whom you claim to love. That would be less offensive to God than the evil of abortion. Because no one is more vulnerable than an unborn child. No one is more helpless than they. So how did we get to this point? How in our country, we can imagine in other nations how murdering the innocent could happen because everybody gets murdered. It's just kind of a lawless time in the country. Fine, fair enough. It's important to know, although I don't recommend you use this knowledge in conversation, why in every major culture throughout history, murdering innocent lives has been an essential aspect of that culture. Just study history. Every major culture from the beginning of time, as a part of their culture, has had murder of the innocent. And why is this? One of the greatest demons who seeks to control society, his name is Moloch. I don't recommend you use that name ever, but I teach it to you now. Moloch is the demon of murder. And not just any type of murder, the murder of the innocent, of the weak. And the more holy and pure and innocent the individual who is murdered in his name, the greater power he obtains in this world. The more control he has over people and over cultures. Ever since Cain slew his brother Abel, Moloch has been reigning in the world. So how did he get a foothold in our country? I mean, go back a couple of hundred years. There may have been murder on some level, but not culturally approved. How did he get a foothold? How did he come to be the king of the United States and many other countries throughout the world? Like all smart persons, he worked his way in through a secondary channel. He knew it probably wouldn't work to attack us directly, our idea of human dignity and human respect. So he worked his way in through another channel altogether: human sexuality. The only reason abortion became legal in this country is because of the sins of impurity. It's the only reason. All of the arguments you hear nowadays, oh, it's not really a person yet because it's not born, it's just tissue growing. Those are all lies, of course. Anyone who knows biology knows it's not true. And those arguments were given after the fact. What led up to the great evil of abortion? It all comes back to human identity. What it means to be a person and an individual. And for us, even though we're made in God's image and likeness, our soul is not the only aspect of our being. We're not angels. Our bodies are intrinsically connected to our identity. And so how we view our bodies and what we do with and in and because of our bodies and with other bodies affects on a profound level self-identity, and therefore how we identify others, and ultimately all of our moral judgments. See, Moloch came to reign because all he had to do was slowly pervert the sexual morality of the people, little by little, taking his time. Remember, demons don't sleep. They don't get tired. They don't need to eat. They can wait centuries for their goals. And we can track sexual immorality backwards, if you will. We see how perverted it is right now in our culture. It's so perverted that a man who's clearly biologically a man can claim to be a woman, which is insane, and a woman who's clearly biologically a woman can claim to be a man. That's absolute insanity. That's a failure to recognize objective, physical, scientific evidence. Well, how did we get to this point? Well, before that, it was homosexuality. Fine, you're maybe a guy, but you love other men. Well, wait a minute, that contradicts biological complementarity of the sexes in nature. So it was homosexuality that led to the identity crisis. But what led to homosexuality? Again, just trace the sexual perversions back. You get all the way to things like divorce. What led to divorce? Contraception. What brought about contraception? Promiscuity, sex outside of marriage. What encouraged and led to that? Personal sins of impurity, things like pornography and masturbation and lust. All a society has to do is slowly permit one degree of evil, and it will inevitably progress to the next. And Moloch was just waiting, biding his time. He's tried other tactics throughout history in other cultures. But this time he let the demons of impurity do their work before he stepped in with the most heinous of all evils, the murdering of the unborn. All because of sexual impurity. And it's easy for us as Catholics to stand back and look at the culture and say, yes, we are against abortion. Yes, we think that's evil. We need to overturn it. But wait a minute. How did it come to be? And how many of us are not totally in union with Christ in regards to sexual morality? And we claim to be against abortion. St. Paul warns us. He warns us in the second reading today. He says that there can be no divisions among us. No divisions. We must be one in mind and heart. And that unity is not with Paul, it's not with Cephas, it's with Christ. We must have the mind and the heart of Christ. That means we follow his teachings and his alone. And that's a struggle, right? I'm not saying it's easy. It's something you just snap your fingers and suddenly you'll start doing. But that's why we have the sacraments. That's why we go to confession when we fail, because we're striving for that unity with Christ. But until we as Catholics set the stage for unity with one another in Jesus Christ, and in these moral teachings specifically, then there is no hope for our culture. And you might as well stop fighting abortion. There's no point. It's not going to stop, not that way at least. Apart from conversion from within, the only way for God to end the evils of something like abortion in a culture is to destroy the culture itself. That's the only way historically. It's sad, but there is no other way. So if we, by the grace of God, are not able to become instruments of conversion for others, then we simply wait for destruction. Doesn't mean we can't be saved, but the culture might not be saved. Our gospel tells us that when Jesus came to Galilee, he was as the light coming into the darkness of sin. In fact, they called that area a land overshadowed by death. I think that's an apt title for the United States and for many countries throughout the world. Lands overshadowed by death, by murder. And yet the light has arisen for us. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it. And our job, our responsibility, is to turn away from the darkness and towards the light, to seek to be totally united to the light in all ways, in all of our beliefs and all of our actions. If we do that, then the light of Christ will be able to shine through us, hopefully bringing more into the light. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.